I was out of town for a while, for a month to be exact. And during this time, it was my goal to be fully surrendered to God. And so I can clearly hear his voice and align myself with his will and his purpose and his calling for my life. And upon my return back, I immediately felt the weight of my call. I immediately felt the devil pulling and tugging at me to revert back to some of the things that I was trying to escape, to revert back to walking in my feelings and not in my faith. Even so much so, I even forgot some of my equipment, and I'm now having to improvise for the time being. I just felt so defeated, and the only thing that I could do was just turn to God and lean into him and just say, Lord, I know that you have this calling in my life, on my life. You have shown this to me. And I'm starting to feel the weight of everything. The weight of me leaving my equipment, the weight of the people around me, the weight of the culture of this city. I just felt the temptation pulling me to go back to the old ways, to revert to my old path. I had to base my next move not on how I felt, but on what I knew. And this reminded me of David. David was anointed king, but he still had to wait a period of time before he was able to reign as king. And during that time, he ended up fleeing for his life, literally running for his life from Saul, all because of jealousy. During this time, David was going through a range of emotions, from grief to sadness to depression to anxiety. He was literally fearing for his life. And he ended up finding refuge with the Philistines, who were the enemy. He was able to gain trust in the eyesight of the king. David kind of worked as a double agent, because even though he was fighting indirectly for Philistine, he was still fighting against the enemies of Israel. And he did it in such a way that the Philistines thought he was fighting with them. But the whole time, his main purpose was to defeat the enemies of Israel. And so when it got time for the Philistines to actually go up against Israel, the commanders of the Philistine army, they seen David and they told the king, that was like, we don't trust him, you know. What if we get to fighting Israel and he decides that he wants to help them and he turns on us and starts fighting us? And so the king sends him back, and David is now rejected by the Philistines. And so as he goes back to his base, he discovers that everything that he loved has been taken. His wives have been taken, his family has been taken, and his city has been burnt down. And David had a very humane reaction. He cried and he wept until he couldn't anymore, until he literally didn't have any strength left. And not only was he dealing with his own emotions, but he then had to face the people, the men that was with him, because they became bitter and they was threatening to stone him. It was all weighing him down. It was all weighing him down. Just think about it and put yourself in David's shoes, how you're in this position and you're grieving over the stuff that you love, and you also have to deal with the people. But David found strength in the Lord. It says in Psalms 27, the Lord is my light and salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Even though he was in a bad situation, even though he was weighed down by such emotion and such bitterness, he still was able to remember who the Lord was. And he went to God and he said, Lord, should I pursue after them? And the Lord said, pursue, for you shall overtake them and recover all. He still had to go and fight, but the battle was already won. Not because of David's tactical ability, because David was a warrior. Wasn't nobody seeing David really in the battlefield. Even Saul, that's the main reason why Saul was jealous. They were saying Saul killed his thousands, but David killed his 10,000. So David was a very skillful warrior. The reason why David had the victory was because God said so. It reminds me also of Paul, when Paul was dealing with the thorn in his flesh. 3 times he went to the Lord to remove this thorn. And the Lord just said, my grace is sufficient for you. Whenever you are weak, God will make you strong. Whenever you are weak, God is the reason why you're still able to live to see another day. He's the reason why you can fight on in the midst of adversity, in the midst of depression. When the odds are literally stacked up against you, they are not in your favor. God is the reason why you are still able to have the victory. It's not by might, it's not by power, but it's by His Spirit that we are able to overcome. It's by His Spirit that we are more than conquerors in this world. So understand this, you may be going through a season right now where it seems like you don't know what to do. You don't know which direction to turn. You've tried everything. You've been faithful. You've been coming to church. You've been praying. You've been fasting. It seems like you can't hear from God. It seems like you can't get a sense of God. You're waiting on God to do something for you. In the midst of you waiting, I want you to remember and take hold to the fact that the battle is already won. It may not feel like it. It may not seem like it. It may not even look like it. We already have the victory through Jesus Christ. We are more than conquerors through Christ Jesus. So anything that we face, anything that we go up against, we still have to go through it. David said in Psalm 23, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. He still had to walk through the valley, but God was with him. His rod and his staff comfort us. I trust in God because He has never failed and He never will. So when you are faced with trials, when you are faced with the valley, when you are faced with the valley of shadow of death, walk through it knowing that the battle is already won.